Okay, so we have Andrew Farago, the curator for the San Francisco Cartoon Art Museum, author and cartoonist. So welcome to ISCACon 29, live from our homes.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Wish I could be, in your home specifically because it's close to my parents' home, which would be great. But
Yeah, we were just talking about how you sort of saw that I was in Oberlin and shot me a message, and I was like, oh yeah, cool. And so yeah, I just moved here. You moved from here. How long you been in San Francisco, outside of Ohio?
it's been 20 years now. So
Okay, so
uh,
not a recent like not a recent move.
yeah, I attended Colorado College for 4 years, graduated, did a year in Boston, and then moved to San Francisco. And I've been out here since January 2000. So that's nice, convenient, easy way to remember.
Oh, there you go. You got a solid anniversary month.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so I guess like my one of the biggest questions I kind of had coming into this is just what goes into curating a museum at all, let alone one dedicated to cartoon art, because I think that's something that everyone present here is interested in. So I don't know if there's an easy answer to that, but we got time, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that it's especially this year. What goes into it is a lot of meticulous planning and preparation and study and advanced work, and the willingness and expectation that that's all going to be thrown out the window and that you'll have to reinvent everything on the fly. And um, that's really how this job has gone as long as I've had it. Is that we do a lot of um, I've got a lot of it's probably like a if you see an animation story room with things just tacked up all over the place, notes pinned on the walls, probably those crazy diagrams where you have strings connecting one thing to another. um, but yeah, there's so many. There are about a million moving parts when you're planning a museum schedule. So we have things like, um, when I'm looking at a 2 year or a 5 year or a 10 year plan, um, I look at popular characters in comics and animation. I look at anniversary dates. I look at things that I think the public would want to see, but I'm always interested in spotlighting lesser known cartoonists and illustrators and cartoons and animation projects. So there's a lot of back and forth, give and take. So there are things that, um, things that I personally would like to see, things that I know um, older fans would like to see, younger fans would like to see, and it's kind of a constant juggling act. So when we do an exhibition featuring a really popular, universally known famous character like Garfield or Spider-Man or a character like that, um, I know that's the time that we want to spotlight a lesser known caricature artist or an indie cartoonist that people don't know. When we have something like Calvin and Hobbes or Batman that's going to bring in the general public, then we get a little more esoteric with our other exhibitions. And it's, like I said, kind of a, if you've ever seen an animation storyboard room where they have things ready to just switch around and change up, um, it's a lot like that, our calendar, because sometimes I'll get a phone call from someone at an animation studio or a film studio, where relatively last minute they'll offer us, hey, would you like to do an inside look at Coraline or Fantastic Mr. Fox, or some movie that is uh, coming out in the near future, and I have to look at our schedule, see, can we do this? Can we make an adjustment? 2020, of course, has thrown all kinds of plans out the window. So we've been um, adjusting. We just recently reopened to the public after being closed for more than 6 months. And we were already bracing ourselves for the potential of closing up again because California's COVID cases have been spiking. So, I'd say flexibility and adaptability have been the key. Have been some of my most important um, skills here, like over the past 2 decades, is you just never know what's coming up next and how you have to adjust to it.
Yeah, and that's been kind of like extra essential this year, right? Like just being able to see the writing on the wall and be like, okay, this is how we need to approach this, and you almost need to be like a couple months ahead of the changes so that you're ready to adjust to them as they come. In terms of like, I'm of course speaking as an event programmer as well. That's why we're meeting on Zoom instead of at a resort in Las Vegas at the moment. So yeah, I totally understand and respect that whole skill set. So you mentioned Coraline and Fantastic Mr. Fox, and so when I have not personally been to the Cartoon Art Museum, so I'd actually really love to hear more about its mission, its what exists in the archives there and all that stuff. But so my immediate instinct was that it went to just like comic books and funny pages. But do you deal in animation as well traditionally, or is that just when certain companies come to you to do a showcase like that?
Okay. Yeah. So the museum was founded in 1984 by a man named Malcolm White, and he and his friends. Um, he was a publisher, and he knew all the underground artists in San Francisco. But he was also friends with animators. He was friends with people like Charles Schultz and Maury Turner, um, and he realized he had interest in all these different aspects of cartooning. So he thought, let's bring them together under one roof, and that included it included caricature, it included classic Disney animation, comic book and comic strip art, um, children's book illustration. So anything that he felt fell under that umbrella. And we've had people ask, well, why don't you call yourself the Comic Art Museum or the Illustration Museum or the Fine, uh, um, the Graphic Arts Museum? And we feel cartoon is just that great catch-all word for all of this. So right now, actually, the past couple months, I've been spending, to replace an exhibition that we had to ship back when we didn't know when our reopening date was. I've been going through our permanent collection and pulling Disney and Warner Brothers art all the way through Cartoon Network materials from the early 2000s, late 90s, so that I could have a nice permanent collection exhibition on display when we reopened. And if it's quality work, if it falls under the umbrella of cartooning, we're interested in it. We actually hosted a really great caricature exhibition at the end of 2019, start of 2020, and that was featuring the work of John Cashed. So brilliant caricature artist, great guy, persistent. Thankfully, he called me several times leading up to that exhibition, saying like, I would love to see the artwork on display there. How can we make that happen? And he stuck with it. I had mutual friends like Nick Galifianakis, who's a great caricature artist, and cartoonist himself. And we were all mutual admirers of the late Richard Thompson, who was a friend of ours. So we had enough connections in common, and I was a big fan of John's work. So I said, yeah, we absolutely have to make this happen. And it turned out that Pete Docter of Pixar was a big fan. So we actually tapped Pete to say, like, how can we make this happen? And would you, as a fundraiser, would you do an event where you interviewed John at the museum? So again, it's great to have all these connections and know all these people throughout the cartooning and comics business. Pixar is actually just a few miles from my house, so it's good to know
Oh wow.
there's who do work in the digital field. So I know a lot of really traditional artists, people who do pen and ink, and are going to be pen on paper until that doesn't exist anymore. And I know people who are looking at last year's tablets and getting ready to throw them out because that new pen nib or new software is coming out. So
And
we're really catch all, and as you mentioned, or as I mentioned too, things like Coraline, like we will show the art from stop motion animation. We'll focus on costuming. We'll focus on character design and storyboarding, and anything that's going to be visually interesting and educational. We'll show that.
that's interesting. I want to mention first about John Cash before I get into my next question, which is about the sort of like the digital art versus the pen and paper art that you brought up. But with John, he was a speaker for us. He was our guest of honor back in 2012 when we had our con in San Antonio. And he's a great guy. I love his work. I got to talk to him with a little bit, and he's a very cool person. And he was set. I'm guessing that exhibit was moving right from your museum to the Billy Ireland Museum in Ohio State University in Columbus, which is first of all, I was excited to find out that there is more than one cartoon museum out there, and so I'm like, okay, now I got to get out to San Francisco and check yours out. But I do a lot of work in Columbus, so whenever I'm down there, I try to check out the exhibitions. And and so I just missed that John Cash one because it came here right as the shutdown started, right as all this happened. So it was just sort of sitting in the wings, waiting to open to the public. And eventually it did, but by that point I was not traveling anymore, so I have not gotten to see the exhibit, unfortunately. But yeah, and also talking about your connections, being this organization is a great way to meet contacts in the caricature world as well, whether they're lesser known comic artists or underground caricaturists or stuff like that, or you just need a friend of a friend to relay to someone else that, hey, you're looking for exhibits. We got all that here, so that's great. I did want to ask then, so like as a museum curator, do you worry about the advent of like the expansion of people moving to digital art? Do you feel like it's going to be harder and harder to curate a museum as less and less physical like art is being created? Do you think that's something to even worry about, or do you think that's so far off that it's not a thought in your head?
We've had to absolutely make adjustments, and I think probably within the last decade, maybe even longer ago than that, I was starting to encounter people. Someone would come out with a new graphic novel, or there would be an exciting comic strip that caught my eye, and I would approach them about, hey, can we? I think this will be a perfect fit for this particular exhibition, and then they would break it to me that hey, I work on a tablet, and my work is 100% digital. In some cases, I would say, yeah, it's been interesting actually. Even since I've been on staff, I've seen this shift of I've had people apologize because um, their original artwork looks a little bit incomplete because there's no lettering on it, or because um, they don't spot blacks on their pages because they do that all digitally. And so they've apologized and said, I can send you this artwork, but it looks very sparse and empty. And then that's gradually transitioned over to I'm 100% digital, and I can send you some files so you can print this out yourself. And for the most part, for the most part, our visitors have been very understanding about that. They think it's interesting to see, um, you know, to just get a sense of what the process is when it's possible for the all digital art. Um, a lot of people do save their process as they go, so we're able to pull back that curtain a little bit and show them. Um, Someone wrote a script, then the artist thumbnailed it and did some rough sketches, and then gradually it became this page that you saw in the book. And it's been a transition. It's going to affect us as far as what we collect and save for our archives, because um, while we have made that adjustment, and we have had exhibitions of these are high quality prints of artwork that only exists digitally. There's a little less interest in saving those, um, in our climate controlled flat files for posterity. Um, I don't imagine us having a drawer that's nothing but thumb drives, where we just save. This is these 5 graphic novels from this cartoonist, or this is a year's worth of this particular comic strip that was done all digitally. But yeah, we've absolutely had to adapt. I think any museum that is dealing with um, current artwork as well as history has had to make this kind of a adjustment. And if you're a Civil War history museum, then you're dealing with a finite period, so you're not going to you don't have to keep expanding your definition of what counts and what doesn't. But yeah, for us, where cartooning is very much a living, breathing art form, we're having to yeah, we have to change with the times.
Yeah, and it can even, I mean, because you mentioned that, a lot of like history museums are dealing with a finite period. Your role could be, in essence, to chronicle that shift, that transition from how artists work and present their work. Um, do you have like a particular personal favorite piece in your collection, like a prized piece that you have on display?
I think if and again, with 2020 going the way it is, we've had to think more in terms of disaster movies and things. So if there's a big explosion and I know I have time to come in and grab one piece before San Francisco disappears, it's probably we've got an EC Segar Sunday comic from Popeye that I think that would be at the top of my list as far as what I would grab.
Wow.
Uh, and it's he was a he was a he was one of the greatest cartoonists of all time, and his peak was such a limited uh, window because he died from leukemia. Um, about 10 years after he introduced Popeye into his comic strip. And I actually, I don't think it was even 10 years. And he, um, So the original artwork we have from him is incredibly rare. And the Sunday page that we have is actually, it's got a special bonus, which we've got a couple of panels that I think the syndicate made him redraw to change the ending of the strip, make it a little bit less violent, make Popeye a little less violent toward authority figures. So it's a really cool strip. It's really dynamic. It's one of my personal favorites. So I think that's probably the one that I would grab.
And is that one in color, or were they doing color Sunday papers back in those days?
Well, it's the original artwork, so it would have been colored on a different, with a different process. It would have been colored at the printers.
Gotcha.
So thankfully, it's there in glorious black and white. So I'd probably grab that if I had a van and I had 20 minutes. We've actually got his drawing table too.
Oh wow!
So we've got that. We've got some Charles Schulz illustrations. We've got a Bill Watterson Calvin and Hobbes drawing that he did for us as an institution in the mid '90s, and this was actually, it's one of the very few licensed Calvin and Hobbes things you could have ever bought, which was this Calvin and Hobbes print that he made for the museum around 1995.
Oh wow!
So everybody knows he's very averse to products and licensing, so that was a really nice thing. Yeah, so we've got that. We've got some George Harriman Crazy Cat Sunday comics. So there's a selection of things that I would grab in an emergency.
Yeah, no doubt. That's gotta be quite a collection. I like I said already, I would love to see it. I actually, this is just a random aside. I just found out Bill Watterson still lives in the Cleveland area, and my landlord fixed his piano. Like my landlord does piano repair and home rentals, and yeah, he's like, oh yeah, just Bill Watterson's place. Cool. I didn't even know he was kicking around here.
Yeah, I've got some friends who, again, through Richard Thompson, who, if you're a fan of caricature, if you're a fan of comic strips, look up Richard Thompson, cartoonist of Cul-de-sac. So he passed away due to complications from Parkinson's a few years ago, but he was a good friend, a great guy, great, brilliant cartoonist. He and Bill Watterson connected, and Cul-de-sac, which was Richard's comic strip, was, it was I'd say, yeah, it's the front runner for best comic strip of the millennium. Great strip, and Watterson actually enjoyed it so much that he reached out to the syndicate. He became friends with Richard, actually wrote an introduction for one of his books. And for somebody like Bill Watterson, who values his privacy as much as he does, that spoke volumes about the type of person that Richard was, and how powerful his work was. And Richard as a caricature artist was one of the best.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say I'm not familiar, so I wrote that down, so I make sure to look that up after this interview. I do have a couple questions that people have been posting in the chat here, but I'm going to save those till the end to open up that Q&A. So if anyone's wondering when their question is going to be asked, I will get to it. I wanted to ask you, I wanted to shift away from talking about the museum to talk about your books, because your that bibliography is pretty impressive. So when we announced that you'd be speaking at ISCO, we had a couple people commend you on the work that went into your Batman book, first of all, and I know you got another one coming out, the Sideshow DC one.
And in stores today, coincidentally.
In stores today, perfect timing, awesome. So regarding I mean, I imagine there's a lot of crossover from curating a museum and then doing the research that goes into a book like that. And for those who don't know, feel free to tell them a little bit about what you do as an author. And if you want to speak specifically about any one of those books, that's fine. But then, yeah, I just really love to know what it takes and what the process is to compile something like, especially like Batman, which is just so vast and has such a storied history. Like, how do you boil that down to even like the size you got it to?
Yeah. So I've been, um, I would say technically I've been writing about comics professionally since I started at the museum. Again, back in summer of 2000. So I started writing about comics. I started writing exhibition text, and through that, eventually, one of our past board members recommended me to this locally based publisher called Insight Editions when they were working on a book about. I think the first one was they were working on a book called The Hanna-Barbera Treasury, written by Jerry Beck, who writes uh, beautifully. He writes a lot of great books about animation history. And they reached out to me about getting some scans from our collection, from the Cartoon Art Museum's archives, for potential use in their Hanna-Barbera history book. And not long after that, one of our former board members put forth my name when someone was working on a book on the 100 greatest Looney Tunes. So they were looking for people to write essays on a few specific um, Looney Tunes, and so I contributed to that, which led to writing a book called The Looney Tunes Treasury for them the following year. So, having gotten my feet wet, and I still consider myself a part timer at this, but every once in a while they'd come back to me and they'd say, "Hey, we got the license for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Would you like to make a pitch for that? Let us know what would your approach be? How would you make this into a can't miss history book?" So since then, I've done 80s animation. I've done Harley Quinn. I wrote a Peanuts book for another publisher, and it was, I think, summer of 2018. One of my usual editors said, "Hey, do you want to do a book on Batman?" And we talked about it. I went back and forth on it because it was going to be such a huge project. It was covering 80 years of Batman in depth, and it was not going to just be the comics. It was going to be animation. It was going to be live action, video games, pretty much everything. And I kind of psyched myself out of it several times, but I also said, I'm gonna kick myself if I don't write this, because I know, um, I already know a lot about the comics. I already know a lot of the artists and the writers and the people that I want to reach out to. Um, and I know I would kick myself if I didn't get to um, try to interview people like Julie Newmar and Mark Hamill, Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. So, um, I talked myself into it. It was a gigantic project, especially given the really tight timetable that we had on it. We had to get that done in time for Batman's 80th anniversary, because if you're a fan of square numbers, 81st anniversary sounds cool, but uh, to get all the promotion, to get the full effect of DC and Warner Brothers getting behind it, we had to get it out in time for the 80th anniversary. So about 2/3 of the way through, we actually brought in a co-writer, Gina McIntyre, to help me with the movie chapters. She's a video gamer, so she did the video game chapters. Took some of the interviews that I did and um, helped us bring it in on time. So it was a team effort, but that was a lot of fun. As I said, today is actually the debut of a new book about um, DC Comics characters, and the um, toys and statues and other collectibles made by a company called Sideshow. So they do um, high-end collectibles. If you've gone to San Diego Comic-Con or New York Comic-Con, you've seen their displays where they've got um, really incredibly fancy high-end statues and action figures. So it's kind of a photography book, but I had a lot of fun writing it because I got to learn about um, sculpture and graphic design and costume fabrication and all these behind the scenes people who work on um, these really top notch, jaw dropping, high end collectibles. So that's a fun thing. I'm actually starting work on another book for them um, right now. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's something I never really thought I was going to end up doing, but it's been a pretty regular thing for me for the past decade.
That's great. That's cool. And like I said, I've heard a lot of good things about that Batman book, and I'm looking forward to checking it out myself. And that sideshow one is the one that kind of caught my eye. I was like, because I didn't fully grasp what, because you seem to have like your hand in so many different aspects of like comics and cartooning and stuff, and I'm just like, wait, is this, he's an author, he's an artist, and so I'm just that's when I messaged, I'm just like, hey, what are you doing, do you want to talk to Iska? So uh so you also do cartooning. We were talking a little bit about that before we opened the Zoom room. Do you want to talk a little bit about your cartoons, or your approach to cartooning, or where we can find your cartoons?
Yeah, I've always been drawing cartoons and comics as far back as I can remember, and um, I studied studio art was my major at Colorado College, and I've pretty much for the longest time I was sure I was gonna do um, try to go make a go of it as a professional comic strip artist or comic book artist maybe. And over time I kind of got to look at the the work that goes into that, the work that it requires to um, take your own art to that next level where you can do it professionally. The rift, the gap between um, you know pretty good for you know pretty good for an amateur, pretty good for natural talent, and professional level is huge. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to um, put in the hours and make that commitment. And I may have missed my window, but I still do cartooning for fun. When I go to comic conventions, I usually have my own zines and mini comics and things there. I did web comic for a while. So just again, just mostly for fun, mostly to keep my hand in it, so that I'm um, you know and enough that I'm enjoying it, enough that I'm a little frustrated at my abilities and my limitations. But um, yeah, I'm always drawing, always getting in trouble during staff meetings for not paying attention to what's being said, and uh, doodling and sketching instead. But yeah, that's always been a real passion of mine is art. And I'm glad I gradually made my way into this profession that combines my interest in uh, art and comics and animation and the thing I didn't mention about the books that I work on is a lot of that process for me is interviewing people. So it's kind of novel for me here to be on the opposite end of an interview and answering questions about myself, because um, I've always, and maybe it's the Mr. Rogers in me, but I've always loved just going up to people and asking, tell me absolutely everything there is to know about. Oh, great shirt. uh, Absolutely everything there is to know about, like, who you are and what you do. And um, so that's always been a really fun part for me, is just get a comic book artist or writer or animator or costume designer on the phone and just um, yeah, tell me your story. What do you what can you tell me about what you do?
Yeah, and I think you're doing a great job being on the other side of that fence. How am I doing as an interviewer?
Oh, great. This is
Awesome. Cool. I actually I did a documentary film that just released within the last year, and we actually premiered it almost a year to the date at ISCACon last year. It was a documentary about caricature art, and so that was new to me, being in that position of interviewing people. But it came from the same place of, like, I want to showcase people and hear what they have to say, and I want to hear it in their own words. I want to take the focus off of me, and I want it to be about this community and these people, and get some new perspectives that I didn't have before. And it is really an enlightening experience hosting, interviewing people, and kind of taking their insight and boiling it down to the main point of what they're trying to get across, or the main message of the topic at hand. So yeah, again, another thing that I just respect, and totally, I get it and I understand it, and it is something very, very cool, I think, to be able to just be able to sit down with people that you respect and admire, and have them tell you passionately why they do what they do. I think that's very cool, and that's why I'm here right now. So I appreciate you giving us your time to participate in this. It's been very enlightening. Um, we do have some questions in the chat, just a few, but I'll run you through them. Our first one from Liz. How would you describe the distinction between caricaturing and cartooning?
Okay. I would put caricaturing under that whole cartooning umbrella. It's all part of the same family. So again, we hosted John Cast's retrospective, which I think was called Drawing the Line, and oh no, Making Faces. What that exhibition was called. But we hosted his work. We actually about 10 years ago, we did a Warner Brothers Looney Tunes exhibition, and we had some cartoons from a Warner Brothers staffer named Sam Nicholson, who was, he was part of that crew with Chuck Jones and Bob McKimson and all those classic animators. But we got to display some of his caricature art, and it's really all under the same umbrella. So I think obviously it runs the range, and it's pretty neat. Like I know people like actually, like a lot of the Mad Magazine crew I've gotten to know over the past decade or so. And I'm actually thinking of, again, some of the last people we got to see before lockdown is as I remember late last year, Tom Richmond, best known for Mad Magazine, was in San Francisco, and he did a series of workshops at the museum. And what's great about what's great about Tom is like he still um, again like, all pre-COVID and everything, but he still kept his fingers in the going to the Mall of America, going to festivals and fairs and amusement parks, and doing the on the spot caricatures for people. So he did that, like in addition to his movie parodies, in addition to magazine illustrations. Um, so it's very cool that like somebody again at the top of his game still wanted to do like I want to get out there, I want to meet with the people, I want to do these fun things. I know Rolling Stone caricaturists who still do private events and cocktail parties and things. Um, so it's really fun seeing the passion for drawing that I think unites everybody under this umbrella here, like um, the cartoonists who do the gag cartoons to the people who do um, digital illustration with the most high-end, up-to-date, modern computer software. It's all from at the core of it, you've got people who want to use pictures to communicate ideas and tell stories, and that's great.
Yeah, and speaking of Tom, Mad Magazine specifically, Mad Magazine is probably the greatest bridge between cartooning and caricature, and this specific community of the International Society of Caricature Artists. And Tom, specifically talking about Tom, nothing but love and respect for him. He's awesome at everything he does and attempts. And he's been president of this organization. He's been president of the NCS. So he definitely walks that tightrope of character and cartooning and bridges those worlds in a pretty profound way, and it's pretty cool. And it was his drawing of you, I think, for NCS Fest that might even been this year. His drawing of you that we used for the promotional images for this con. And he actually popped into our Discord server a little bit ago. I don't know if he's here watching right now, but if he is, hi
I've got
Tom.
to say it was great. I was tapped to moderate a panel at the NCS Fest. Again, I think it would have been 2019, because we didn't get to have a National Cartoonist Society get together this year. But this is such an amazing turn of events. They said, "Do you want to moderate this this panel, or do you want to be on this one at the NCS Fest?" I said, "Sure." And they said, "Do you have a caricature of yourself that you want to use for this, or would you like Tom Richmond to draw one?" And it's like, well, well, absolutely. I want Tom Richmond. Yeah. I said, "Sure." And I swear it was like within an hour, like Tom said, "Yeah, I'm on it." And then like that hit my inbox right away. So he is, um, again, he's known me for a long time, and I don't know if that helps or hurts when you're doing a caricature of somebody. Um, but he turned that around so quickly, and it was so spot on that yeah, it was floored. I almost said, well, I better reject that until you can get like, is Sam Viviano available? Can you get you know Mort Drucker or John Cash? Like who do you have on the line that can like I'll just keep milking this. Yeah.
Yeah, Tom and Tom, again, I can't say enough good things about him. He's super reliable too. So he's always, for as busy a guy as he is, he's always like one of the first people to email me back when I'm just like, "Hey Tom, this kid needs this," and he's like, "You got it." Oh, cool, appreciate it. We actually even have some of his Mall of America employees in here watching this right now. I realize he's got a staff that's part of VISCA as well, and they're hanging out, and so giving them a little shout out here. I'm going to move down to a couple more questions. So have you done any collaborations with other caricature or cartoon museums?
Okay. Yeah, we've you mentioned the Billy Ireland Museum, and actually my predecessor at the Cartoon Art Museum is now the director over there. So Jenny Robb,
Oh, wow.
she yeah, she was the curator at the Cartoon Art Museum when I started as a volunteer back in the summer of 2000. And um, I worked directly with her, and pretty much everything I learned about this job was under her direction. So um, yeah, that was very cool. So when that opportunity came up and she moved to Columbus, she was the perfect person for that job, and she said, go to it. And so I took over as the curator here in San Francisco, and and we're all in touch. So we know the people in New York at the Society of Illustrators. Um, we know the comics and cartoon specific people who run the major university libraries. So yeah, and at the Library of Congress and the National Archives. So it's a very tight knit group. Like we would be, um, you know, a very small, very ineffective union if we all got together, because it's a smaller group than you have watching us right now. But yeah, it's a very tight knit community. So whenever we get to share resources, when we have, I should also mention the Charles Schulz Museum and the Walt Disney Family Museum, which are both here uh, in Northern California. So yeah, we all know each other. When opportunities come up that um, make sense for collaborations, we reach out to each other. If I get a research question that I know I'm going to have trouble with, but the Walt Disney Family Museum will be on top of it, I send something their way. If uh, someone approaches the Charles Schulz Museum with a comic strip donation that doesn't fit with their archives, but would be a good match for us, they'll send them our way. So yeah, it's a big happy family.
That's cool. All right, so Ben asked. So we asked about your most valued piece in the museum collection. Ben asks, do you have a large personal collection, and what is your prized possession on your own bookshelf?
Okay, yeah. We've got I have never been a huge collector myself, because I get to um, in part because I work in the nonprofit um, sector, so that does put a pretty hard cap on my art buying budget. The people I know who are um, big time art buyers have pretty high rolling jobs. But I've picked up some cool things here and there over the years. Sometimes as gifts, sometimes I save up and treat myself to something. So um, I've got a couple of John Romita Jr. Daredevil pages, because that was one of my favorites when I was growing up. I've got Norm Brayfogle Batman page, because that's again one of my favorites when I first got into comic books. And I've got a Jack Kirby Commandy page, which my wife got me as a Christmas present, probably right before the Jack Kirby original art market kind of exploded. So that one is, that one's a neat piece in my collection. Um, the highlight is actually a piece that my wife owns, uh, which if you again, another Ohio State Billy Ireland connection. Jeff Smith, who does the comic book Bone. If you're familiar with that comic, he actually ran a contest in his letters column where he was looking uh, for a name for this baby rat creature character in the comic strip in the comic. So um, the character ended up being named Bartleby after a Herman Melville story. And my wife is actually the person who won that contest. So she won a really nice Bone illustration that Jeff did that appeared in the Bone comic book. She got the original art for it. She found out because someone looked her up in the phone book and called her and said, "Hey, do you want to sell me this bone piece that you just won?" And this was before she'd seen that she won the contest. So that's a really incredibly cool piece in our collection. We've gotten to know Jeff over the years, so that's um, this very cool connection to him and to comics history. What I like about it is I realized that's the very first time I saw um, her name in print or her name anywhere was reading that letters column in Bone. It's like, okay, I don't, I, um, it's cool because then I can kind of backtrack and I say, okay, I must have been in my college dorm room reading that issue, and that's the first time I saw my future wife's name.
So it's
uh,
a sentimental value to that as well.
so that's a very cool thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, I got another question here from Ash. She says this builds on sort of the conversation we had about traditional versus digital art as a transition. She asks, as we move into increasingly digital spaces for art curation, how do you anticipate the physical museum space to change or grow? From my understanding, art's viewership is trending towards Instagram and other digital platforms due to accessibility and the ability to find unique independent creators.
Okay. Yeah, we've got we're fortunate to have some very forward-thinking, tech-minded people on our board of directors. One of our board members actually um, joined Pixar in the 1990s and wrote a lot of their software, and now he works for Apple. But he's been spearheading some efforts to do some more. I think it's called augmented reality. The interactive elements where you hold up your camera or you hold up your phone and you scan it across a room and you can we're working on that. I've mentioned process for original art, where people might save in layers and different steps along the way, and we're actually working on some things like that where you may be able to hold your phone in front of some rough pencils and then see a completed colored lettered page right in front of you as you go. So we're working on interactive elements. We're always writing grants, so we're anticipating being able to reopen our classroom spaces again and have kids on site taking classes. But we're looking ahead toward digital animation and um, drawing with tablets, teaching them state of the art contemporary cartooning with modern tools. So we're very much aware that things are changing. I'm fine with us being pretty old fashioned and traditional as much as possible, and that we want people to see ink on paper. We want people to get up close to something that Dr. Seuss drew or that came off of Charles Schultz's or Lynn Johnston's drawing board, so they can get up close and see um, the way that our founder phrases it is making the invisible visible. So he wants you to see the artist's hand. He wants you to see um, look at that brushwork, look at um, you know see the underdrawing here, see the blue pencil and the scribbles and all that. So we want to be and I think that's true for um, really any kind of museum. That um, again, we've had to adjust. We've had to figure out what we can bring what we can bring to people virtually. But there's no substitute for being there, like for being there and seeing great works of art up close and in person.
I agree 100%. Like it's the reason I love going to museums, the reason I love seeing hand drawn, hand painted work. It's like you can see a photograph, but until you see the scale or how the light hits it, you can see the textures of it and all that. So just it tells a story in a way that like a photo representation doesn't always. That's one of the things with this con we're doing too. Like, you know, normally we walk around the room and we see all the artwork everyone's created hung up on the walls, and you can kind of see, you know, you can say, oh wow, they put that much detail at that size, whether it's small or big, or just like, you know, just you can get a sense of how it comes to life by seeing parts of the process, by looking at it physically, and I always appreciate that and look for that. Um, we have time for one more question here, before we let you go here. Brian asks, what are your favorite cartoon museums you have visited or wish to visit?
Okay. It's yeah. I hate to say, having grown up in Ohio, that I have not yet been to the Billy Ireland Museum.
Highly recommend it.
I've got a standing invitation there, and I know, uh, again, Jenny Robb, I know she wants to give me the grand tour whenever I can make it over there. Um, so that one's got to be on the top of my wish list. As far as what the most entertaining one that I've actually visited, I'd have to say it's the Studio Ghibli Museum in Japan. Um, so I was incredibly fortunate to work on an exhibition of Disney artist Mary Blair, again about 10 years ago, and um, my wife and I co-curated that exhibition for the Cartoon Art Museum here in San Francisco. Um, and this was just as the Ghibli Museum, along with some other partners, were making plans for their own exhibition in Tokyo. And so one thing led to another, and we scored an invitation to help bring Mary Blair's art from the US to Japan for a major multi-floored gigantic retrospective exhibition. And so we got to see our handiwork at the Tokyo Contemporary Art Museum. And again, because we worked with Studio Ghibli on this, we got a behind the scenes tour at the Ghibli Museum, which was, yeah, that was fascinating. That's on the short list of my career highlights. Absolutely.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, yeah, I think that about wraps us up. I want to thank you for being here and sharing all of your insight with us. I think, you know, once we're past this pandemic and it's safe to go out again, we'll arrange an ISCA field trip to the Cartoon Art Museum. We'll all come see you in San Francisco.
That'll be great. I'm looking forward to. I'll let you know once we're traveling again. You know, visiting my parents is at the top of my list, so I'll make sure I'll let you know
Yeah,
when.
awesome. Yeah, if you come to Ohio and it's safe, you know, hit me up. And last, I know I and others would love to see this tour, this museum virtually. If you ever have any plans to do like a 3D version of the tour or something that we can check out, I'd love to see it from a safe space, safe distance as well. So if that's ever in the cards, let us know and we will promote it for you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that's in the works. So I think
Oh, perfect.
when we're back in on a more regular basis, right now it's about once a week for the staff members, and not and staggered visits. So we're building up toward that. So
Awesome. Well, thank you once again. We're gonna end it here. So thank you for everyone for joining us. Andrew, if you get a chance, come hop into the Discord channel and see all the art that people are posting and scope it out and talk to some of these fine folks in ISCA.
looking forward to it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. See you later, everyone.
Right, bye.